We're going to start this next session. We're going to just do a little bit about climate justice because it's a really important thing to think about and to kind of acknowledge amongst ourselves. I'm going to put, if I could have the slide, please, next one. Thank you. There's 4 maps of the world up there. They represent different things. The one in the top left-hand corner is the actual size of the land mass of each of those continents. The other 3 represent something else. And I just wonder if in your little groups that you're sitting in your Deanery networks, could you try and just discuss what you think the other 3 maps might be representing? I'm only going to give you 3 minutes, so it's a really quick one, but what do you think is being represented there? The one I find most interesting is the bottom left there. Very kind of rabbit-looking Great Britain in that one. Does anybody want to hazard a guess as to what that map might represent? Historical carbon emissions. Historical. So that's huge. I mean, like if you look at the actual size of Britain and then our historical carbon emissions, because we have this legacy of having done this for such a long time. And if you imagine a carbon budget, if you can imagine, we can get to 1.5 degrees and we can't go any more than that. We have to keep within it. We've already consumed a huge proportion of that budget because historically we've consumed so much, whereas other countries have consumed, vastly less than we have. Look at Africa. And so it is only right and it is only just that people manage to bring up their economies to the point where people can get to hospital if they need to. People can have education in their schools that might need the use of carbon to create roads or whatever that might be. It is only just that those countries that have historically had very little carbon emissions are given the right to use up some of the budget that's left. But that we in this country need to stop using any more of that budget up. That's not the way it's happening. Right now, we're using vastly more than anybody in Africa. The per capita, carbon emissions from somebody in Britain compared to Africa is massively different. But that's what people are talking about with carbon budgets and with climate justice, that those countries that haven't emitted in the past have the right to emit some emissions to be able to create the society that we have and we take for granted. And we need to really radically reduce now because we've already got that society. That's climate justice in a nutshell. What about the top right? What about the top right? What do you think that one might be? Not population. Alwyn, I think was. Sorry? Yeah, it is. It's the current carbon emissions. So again, look at Africa, look at Britain. Yeah, hugely disproportionate. We are emitting so much more per person than anybody in Africa, for example. But what's really different there is actually that Asia is really kind of massively blown up. So Asia is on the process of using more carbon now. What about the one bottom right? Not projected. It's the impact. That's the impact on the population of climate change currently. So very little impact for us, absolutely huge in Asia and growing within Africa. So that's what climate justice is looking at. The abilities of those countries that need to just use up the carbon that's left, and our countries that are already developed and have emitted for a very long time to stop doing so first. Thank you. Next. Yes, thank you. So there's also climate justice just at the local level. This is a really old slide. I mean, gosh, 13.4% of households in the UK are experiencing fuel poverty in 2019. I mean, just imagine what that is this year, especially when the price cap goes in April. I mean, we need to be looking after our communities as well. We need to make sure that this isn't equally distributed. that everybody can have a warm home, but that it doesn't destroy populations in other countries. So there's a really nice article here. Poorer households in the UK should be given free heat pumps, say experts. Absolutely right. We should be insulating people's homes that can't afford to do it themselves. We should be putting those much more sustainable energies into their homes for them. That's climate justice. So making sure that everybody can play their part, and that it's not just for the middle classes that can afford to buy solar or whatever. Thank you. Next slide. Again, apologies to anyone who's seen this before. But we have a linked diocese in Pakistan, and I had the absolute privilege of talking to Bishop Olwyn in November when he came. So it's quite interesting to look at how were things in Pakistan in 2022 last year when he came. In May and June, they experienced plus 50 degrees temperatures. If you've ever sat in, a bath of hot water at 40 degrees, this is 10 degrees more than that. Absolutely. I asked him, how was that? And his response was, I don't know what hell feels like, but I think it must be something like this. And then just a couple of months later, those devastating floods. 33 million people were affected. That represents more or less half the population of Britain. And close to a third of Pakistan was underwater at one time. That's what we're really trying to prevent. And so that's why God is calling us to make these changes now. Thank you. Next slide. So you can have a look at your own carbon footprint if you'd like to. Obviously not now. But when you go home, the World Wildlife Fund, WWF, not the wrestling, obviously, as David said. So WWF has got a really nice, very useful carbon footprint kind of tool. Only takes 5 minutes. It's very useful to be able to see what maybe the big areas in your own life are, or the smaller areas, or whatever. It's not the most detailed one in the world. There are more detailed ones out there. It's a great place to start. Thank you. Next slide. That's my one, just being a... So actually, I was quite pleased to see that I'm 69% of the UK average. So we have really done a lot in our household. It just shows, though, how hard it is. I mean, we work hard at trying to do this reduction. But without those systemic changes, it's really difficult to do it. We use electricity, and I don't have very much control over that grid. How much coal is... I can choose to switch to renewable energy. It doesn't mean renewable energy comes through my plug, but it does mean that I'm actually supporting renewable energy suppliers. And that just creates a market force that just produces more and more. But this, I think, is this for me really shows how much we need to change things systemically. We need to talk to our MPs and say, this is what we want. And as a church, we have such a strong voice to be able to do that. I think we just, we come from a place where we could really make a difference. So it's something worth thinking about. Please do. I'll send around links afterwards, but please do have a look at your own carbon footprint. Right, next slide, thank you. So we're going to have a quick look. I can't go into detail about everything, but I thought it might be quite interesting to look at food because we all eat. And there are some amazing changes that you can make that almost make no difference to you whatsoever, but make a massive difference in terms of carbon. So I just thought it's a really interesting thing to know about. The more you know, the more you can make some nice choices. Next slide, thank you. This was Project Drawdown, which looked at huge solutions all over the world that could be made in agriculture and things in order to reverse global warming. I'm not going to go into that. So next slide. Instead, I'm going to tell you a story about my own family. So there's two things that I did that I think made the biggest change. I've been a vegetarian since I was 20. And that was because I heard about the Brazilian rainforest being cut down and I was like, I don't need meat. I don't actually need it. I can live without it, and I don't need fish. And I heard about overpopulation, so I gave up nearly 30 years ago. That was my thing. But my husband, he loves a burger. And he loves, he loves his bacon and he loves all the rest of it. So it wasn't an easy pushover for me to make changes in my family, but these are two of the things that I did. One was in my shopping. So I made this grid, Monday for, dinner time and lunchtime, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And then I wrote down the little categories of all the areas of the supermarket. And then I planned out a menu every single week. So this is how I do my shopping now. I sit down, got a big folder with all my recipes in it, and I just go, okay, Monday we're going to have vegan burgers with, whatever. And I just buy what we need. I just buy what we need. Whereas I used to go shopping, hopefully, let's get some cucumbers. I'm sure someone will eat them. And you used to kind of like, we'll get this, that, and the other. I'm sure we'll use up some aubergines somehow. And I just, I can't believe I used to shop like that. I used to just go and grab stuff and then just be disappointed in myself when it all went off in the fridge. Now I plan out this menu. I buy what I need. I don't buy bags of stuff. I just buy 2 courgettes. If I know that I need courgettes, I'll buy the 2 that I need and I won't buy the bag. And that's the way that we have really reduced our food waste, massively reduced our food waste in our household. And it's a simple thing to do. At some point, I've got to make the decision, what am I going to eat on Monday night? I might as well make it a little bit earlier, and then that takes the stress off me on Monday. So I just think that's a really simple solution. I'd really kind of recommend it to you. The other thing is I really wanted to move my family away from dairy a little bit. And I was just like, how am I going to do this? So I was a bit sneaky. We decided to get milk and more, so we got the milk bottles that come, and we had the dairy milk and all the rest of it. And then I'd go out and buy my Oatly. And then every now and then, I'd just knock off one of those milk bottles off the delivery order. And then, so my husband would come along on Monday morning and go, there's no milk. And I was like, yeah, there is. No, there's no milk. It's like, well, there's some Oatly there. Oh, God. Tried it. It's really creamy. I really like that. Within about 6 months, I had reduced all of those milk bottles down to 0, and we were just on the other stuff. It doesn't have to be this huge and very, very difficult thing you do. Sometimes it's just getting people over that hurdle of trying something, or getting yourself over that hurdle of trying something. So don't feel like if you want to make changes, you have to do them all at once in one big go. Just sneakily, just introduce a few changes in your household and see what happens. That's my personal story. Next slide, please. So, food habits are changing in the UK. Consumption of fresh meat fell by 23% between 2000 and 2018. That's a big amount, quarter consumption of meat. Dairy down 18% in the same period. And the Committee on Climate Change is now trying to encourage the government. So again, we've got agencies that are trying to tackle this at a systemic government level as well. Next slide, please. So the carbon diet, I would like you in your groups, here's a quick quiz. There is some meat, there is some potatoes, these are locally grown potatoes. We've got some mixed, hang on, what's that? Sorry. There are mixed nuts, there's lentils, and milk. So, tomatoes, yeah, tomatoes. Oh, okay. Okay. Anyway, which of these do you think? Oh, no, sorry, it's the next slide. That's why I'm getting confused. I would say, sorry, next slide, please. Carbon diet. Here we go, a day's protein. This is the one. I'm so sorry. Yes, we've got beef, we've got lentils, we've got mixed nuts, we've got milk, and we've got chicken. Which one do you think has the highest carbon emissions per 50 grams of protein, and which do you think has the lowest? In your groups, could you just try and work out where you think those things might be? All of these facts come from this book called How Bad Are Bananas, which is a really interesting book. There's another one here called There Is No Planet B. Wonderful books written by Mike Berners-Lee. Yes, you do recognize that name. It isn't the man that invented the internet, it's his brother. But he's an ardent, kind of very, scientific, analytical way of looking at climate and carbon. So that comes from here. Anybody like to hazard a guess which one has the highest carbon footprint? Beef, yeah, obviously, that's your burpy cows. What about the next thing? Any ideas? Sorry? I couldn't hear, I'm so sorry. Milk next. Any more? Okay, let's have a little look. The next slide, please. Thank you. So beef. Beef comes in at 25 kilograms of carbon. CO2e. The E means equivalent, so carbon or equivalent gases. Chicken comes at 2.8 kilograms, so it's massively less than beef. Beef is really the baddie in this picture. Milk is 1.6, so it's less than chicken. Lentils is 420 grams, and mixed nut is 130 grams. So the difference between the beef and the mixed nuts is really huge. I know that we all love the food that we've always had and we've grown up with, and it's very much a habitual thing and a comfort thing. But if you want to reduce your carbon, this is a really good way of doing it. It's just a great way to be aware of these sorts of things and to kind of think about what you might be able to do. You don't have to become vegan tomorrow, but you could reduce some things and eat more of other things, which might be just a really useful way of reducing your own carbon footprint.
I'll stand up to save the mic. I'm curious which one of those has most protein.
It was 50 grams of protein, so it's equal protein consumption. Next slide, please. So not all beef is the same. If you're looking at any beef that's been imported from somewhere like South America, it's probably had a bit of rainforest slashed down to produce it, or slashing down some rainforest in order to feed it on soybeans. So high-impact beef often comes from somewhere like South America, and that's really to be avoided. You see, the low-impact beef will be European. British beef is actually on that low-impact side. So it's better than high-impact lamb. Or, it's better, but it's still a big impact going on there. So lamb has it's a ruminant, and it just has a high carbon footprint. Chocolate, if you're getting chocolate from somewhere that's been deforested, it's got a huge carbon footprint. If you're getting sustainably sourced chocolate, it's got a very low footprint. There are good news stories, yay! Susan's like, yeah. So we're coming down through all of these. Cheese and milk, they're much less than beef. And that's because obviously the animal keeps on living in order to produce more and more of it. So it's not as bad, but it's still higher than some of the plant-based foods. So where you get your coffee, your toffee, your beans, and your nuts. Can you see the difference? Imagine just cutting out meat once a week, having a meat-free Monday. That's, that's a very big proportion, perhaps, of your carbon footprint. That's a really nice reduction. Or maybe make it 2 days, or maybe make it 4.
So beer and nuts, that's the answer.
Yes! Thank you, William. And chocolate. The next slide. So a bowl of porridge, even this is such an easy thing. Look, if you make it with water, personally, I wouldn't do that. You make it with water, it's 110 grams. If you make it with cow's milk, it's 800 grams. If you make it with half cow's milk and half water, it's 450. That's not a hard change. That's an easy change. It's those types of things. Can I reduce that dairy? That's something you could do, or you could make it with soy milk, which is actually the same as just using half and half milk and water. Next slide, please. So here we go, carbohydrates. This one's quite interesting as well. In your groups again, you've got 1 minute. Can you decide which of these? It's potatoes, bread, and rice. What do you think the difference might be? Just so we don't go over time, I'm going to pull you back. Out of Rice, potatoes, and bread. What do you think the highest might be? Rice, yeah, it's definitely rice. Mainly because we don't grow a lot of it in this country, so it's obviously been imported, but also there's huge water used in rice production. It's actually not a terribly sustainable food. I still eat rice, but I put it on my menu once a week, so I kind of see it as that Friday night curry night. It's a bit of a nice thing to have. There are other carbohydrates, and we can look at those. So what about between the potatoes and the bread? Which one's better? It is the potatoes. If I could have the next slide. Thank you. The rice is 4 kilograms of CO2 equivalent. And if you get your potatoes locally and you just boil them very gently and you put the lid on, so you're keeping that gas down, it's 0.53. So then again, that's, 8 times more for rice. So these are easy things. You just think, if I eat rice 3 times a week, maybe I'll just eat it once a week. Maybe I'll just have some potatoes instead. Who doesn't love chips? And the bread is 1.25 kilograms, but bread's produced in this country. Why is that? Why is that more than potatoes, do you think? It's the manufacturing, because you have to cut down the corn, then you have to distribute it to somewhere for it to be made into bread, and then just distribute it around again. It's just all of that. Yes?
Where would you put pasta?
Ooh, that's a very good question. I would probably put it alongside bread in that it goes through the same process. It's the flour that goes to be manufactured and then redistributed, whereas your potatoes are just coming from somewhere locally to you. So, yeah. So, again, pasta will have a much lower one than rice. And it's just useful to know. Thank you. Next slide. This one, I was looking through my slides this week, and I suddenly remembered this one, and I changed my habit in the supermarket. So if you're getting large salad variety, locally grown, in-season tomatoes, they're great. Look, that's 1.3 kilograms. If you're getting organic, fine cherry tomatoes grown in a heated hothouse in the UK in March, that's 28.2 kilograms. That's the difference. So it says British produce, and you go, hooray! But actually, it's grown in a hothouse, which is just terrible. Baby plum tomatoes that are shipped in to the UK in the summer or the Spanish winter, 4.9. So sometimes, if it's out of season and it's British, there's going to be a hothouse somewhere, huge amounts of heat, and that's very unsustainable. If it's in season and it's British, that's your best bet. If it's come from somewhere in Europe and it's going to have come just on land, or just, it won't be as good, but it's better than buying hot-housed fruit. So just having an awareness, what's in season right now? If it's being grown out of season in the UK, that's a hothouse. We just need some, and this is where we need the systemic change. If we just had carbon markers, we had traffic lights on our food. It's like, that's a high carbon, that's a red, this one's a green. We could all make these decisions every day without all of this. But we're just telling you what we know so you can make your own decisions. Okay. Yeah. It does, doesn't it? I mean, maybe we could take it through Synod. Maybe we could, who knows? There's all sorts of things that people are thinking about. Maybe our General Synod could be talking. That Synod has talked to governments before by passing things. This is something that we could do. And again, I'm full of hope. I'm full of hope that we could make decisions like that. Right, next slide, please. This is milk. So dairy milk, the emissions are huge, the land use is huge, and the water is huge. Almond milk down the bottom, the carbon is low, the land use is low, the water is big, and then the other ones are kind of in the middle. So you can see there's a very big difference between using oat milk, particularly because oat grows in this country, so it's not going to have any sort of massive shipping things, and dairy. There is a big difference. And we don't have to change everything, but we can change a few things, and we can do it gradually. One really good question that's answered in this book about anything that's coming in It's like, I won't buy avocados because avocados don't grow here and they come in on planes. Or I can't know that they haven't come in on a plane, so I don't buy avocados. But I buy bananas, and bananas don't grow here, but bananas don't go off quickly. And so bananas are shipped on the sea. And when you have a tanker and it's absolutely packed full of produce, it's actually not a very high carbon footprint per banana. So bananas, so this book here, How Bad Are Bananas? The answer is actually they're not very bad because they come on sea freight. So what we're trying to avoid is hot-housed foods and things that are flown in. So if you see blueberries and it says chili, those blueberries have got a very high carbon footprint because they've been flown in, but bananas won't have. If you don't know which one is which, pick up one of these books and it will tell you, which is really useful. Okay, next one. So a third of Britons have made some of these changes. Some people are now vegetarian. Some people are flexitarian, which means that they want to live mainly with plant life, but they, sometimes have some meat just for special occasions. You can make your own choices. You can go on a journey yourselves. It's a nice thing to know about and to decide whether you would like to do for yourself. A really good thing in church, next slide, please. Thank you, is something called default veg, where at the moment, if you're vegetarian, you have to opt in as vegetarian. You have to go up to somebody and say, excuse me, I know there's the harvest lunch next week. I am vegetarian. Please, can you make some food for me that I can eat? Well, there's a new idea, which is that actually the default is vegetarian, but we're not telling people what they have to do. If you want to eat meat, you can, but you have to do what the vegetarians have had to do up to now, which is go up to somebody and say, excuse me, I like eating meat. Please, could you produce some meat food for me so that I can eat some meat? And I think that's a fair thing to do. I think that's quite nice. And then what you're doing is you're making a statement and witnessing as a church, yes, we do want to kind of reduce our dietary carbon emissions, but we're not telling you what to do. You have a choice, but we're going to just make vegetarian our standard. Opt in if you want the meat. So that's just an idea you might want to take back to your church. Couple of things here. This one is Cambridge University. They just very quietly, a bit like my milk, they just took all beef and all lamb off their menus. No one really noticed. But it made a massive difference to their carbon emissions. Massive. They also decided to put all the vegetarian options at the top and then list down, and you got kind of the meat options at the bottom. Just small changes like that actually produce quite big kind of changes in behavior, in people's behaviors. Next one, please. Next slide. Oh, thank you. And then this is not anti-beef, but pro-planet. There's a recipe website called Epicurious, and they just took cows off the menu as well. And you could just decide, you could go through your PCC, but you could just say, considering that massive carbon footprint, we're just going to decide not to do anything with beef anymore. It's a nice way of just knowing that you're doing the right thing in your church, and it's a very good witness. Thank you. So the next one. So the cycle of change. I'm just going to read this one off. So you start, there's this spiral of change. So you have a pre-contemplation where you have no intention of behavior, of changing any behavior. And I think we've all been in that place. I'm not doing that. I'm not giving up flying. I'm not, giving up beef, whatever. That's fine. That we're all in that. This is just to know where people might be. And then you have a contemplation where you become aware of the problem, that it exists, but you haven't made a commitment to any action yourself. I wonder if you can think about where you might be on this cycle. And then you have preparation, where you have an intention to take an action and to address the problem. So you're just starting to think about it. Yeah, I'm going to do that. No, I definitely will. And then you take the action and you modify your behavior. And then maintenance, that's the tricky one. It's all those January pledges. You've made a change, but you have to sustain it. So new behavior replaces the old, and it becomes a complete new thing. And then relapse, you fall back and then you go through the cycle again. So I think we all know this from so many walks of life. People will be going with this in their own lives at the moment. But remember that figure of 1/3 of Britons making changes already. That's our congregations, and they need to hear about this from us too. Great. I think we've got 5 minutes, is that right, for any questions on that? Well, I've got it here, I think.
Thank you. I'm not sure, is it on? Oh, okay. I was just wondering, when we're talking about climate injustice, what about the living that the countries that are currently suffering, if, for example, we don't buy their avocados or we don't buy other things, because that's part of their economy, isn't it? Their exports to us. How do we think about that?
That's a really good question. It's a very, very good question. And it's one that's come up in history as well, isn't it? It was about things like South Africa, and if we don't buy our goods from there, are people actually going to suffer more? I think that we can buy the right goods from those countries, and I think that those countries would be delighted to sell us the right goods and know that their children will survive because of that. And perhaps what we need to be doing then within our COP, within that loss and damage, and within the kind of the global markets, is to be helping those countries to produce sustainable products that then we can buy, so that they're not left isolated economically, but we are all working together to make that sustainable thing. That would be my answer, if that's okay.
Hi, you're talking about soy milk and so on. I've got a concern that eating soy is creating a monocrop, which is damaging the environment. And so I've always had a problem with it. And is that the case?
Brilliant question. So this is really important. This goes back to the proteins and things again as well. So I've heard this. I heard somebody very crossly told me that vegans were ruining the planet because they were all eating soya beans and the rainforests were being cut down to produce the soya beans. What happens is you produce your protein, so soya, for example, and then you've got two choices. You feed that protein to people, or you feed that protein to livestock. And if you feed that protein to people, you don't need so much of it. You need very much less for people to get their protein. But if you take that protein and you feed it to livestock, then people eat the livestock. There's a massive wastage of protein. So you've got this protein potential. Only a small amount of it comes to people through animals. But if they're eating it directly themselves, they get the full benefit from it. And you know, obviously the land usage of, first of all, producing the soya beans and then feeding them to cows and whatever, you know, and chickens and lamb and everything that takes up huge amounts of space. And then it's just phenomenal land use, and there's all that protein gets lost in the process. So eating soya beans isn't a bad thing, because we eat actually so little of them compared to what's being produced. What we need to do is stop buying the soya beans from South America and then feeding them to our livestock. So it's a really good and a very important question. We're okay eating plants. We're just not okay growing plants just to feed them to livestock.
Just as an idea of something we're trying at St Paul's, we're challenging ourselves to go on something called a Lenten carbon fast from Climate Stewards. Are you aware of this one? And it's different things, maybe you're going to mention it, but it's different things each week to do, to abstain from. So.
I have heard of it. I haven't done it myself, but I think it's absolutely wonderful. So every week you get to, like, you might stop using screens for 1 week, and then the next week it might be you go vegan for the week or whatever. It's an absolutely wonderful thing. We're going to be trying, because I'm struggling at the moment on my 1 day a week, to get all of these informations and these wonderful ideas out to everybody. So we're going to try and create a newsletter, and in it we'll have all of these ideas, and we'll be able to put that in for next year in time for you to think about it for your congregations, and perhaps, to tell congregations about it next Lent. So thank you.